All right, sorry about that. We had to actually cut off. There was a technical difficulty that was being dealt with, but we are back. Um, so, Patrick, if you want to just maybe repeat your last question.
Yeah, no, I think it'd be good as questions come in. We can try to answer to the best of our ability. And to kick it off, maybe I could ask you some of the most common questions that we hear from clients before they talk to you as the immigration attorney. And then we can go from there, especially as questions come in. I'm happy to share some free resources for those that are seeking to move to the US through an investment that you can investigate different business and franchise options. One of the first questions we receive, whether it's through an in-person consultation over Zoom, email, etc., is what's the minimum investment on? I have $100,000 to invest. Is
Mhm.
that enough to invest, or does it depend on the type of business, Fadi?
Right. Yeah, exactly. So it does depend on the nature of the business. Um, to put things in perspective, if somebody is setting up, let's say, I don't know, an accounting firm or a consulting firm, right? It's not going to be the same level of investment that's going to be expected as somebody that's setting up some sort of a manufacturing facility of some sort, right? So it does really range. Um, the lowest investment that we've seen as of late, and with the shifting time, sometimes that also does fluctuate with respect to the level of investment that we have seen. But lately, in the last couple of months, I would say we did have a client get approved for just over $40,000 investment.
Not bad.
Now,
So
when
that's
I
$40,000 spent on the business.
correct, yeah,
Okay.
but again, based on the nature of that business, there was no real necessity to just spend needlessly just to meet a certain threshold.
Did he
Um,
already have money coming in? Like, was the business already operating?
it was actually a new business setup, but the overhead and all expenses were very little that was needed there. However, and this is probably what helped in this scenario. There was a immediate need to hire people in the U.S. right
Okay.
for this business. So it's not like somebody that would just I want to be able to spend some time in Florida and work on my tan. I want to be
Exactly.
able to it's a real business, and there was a robust business plan as well. But
So
almost
he had spent 40K, and then I imagine they also looked at the working capital and be like, "Hey, you're hiring employees. How are you going to pay these folks?"
correct. And this is the nature of this business is such that almost within the first month, it's going to start generating revenue, and that
Right.
revenue is going to help to pay for the employees that are being slated for. And there were already contracts in place, by the way, with with clients. So that is, I wouldn't say that's the norm. So when I conduct these consultations on a regular basis, I do advise that you know probably the sweet spot would be at the very least around $75,000 or higher. Um, and when you're looking at, I mean, for your line of work, Patrick, I mean, it's probably going to be hard to find if it is an existing business or franchise that the person's going to go after. Um, you're going to be hard pressed to find something that is probably that little. But I mean, you can
Yeah,
you
that's
know
well said. I mean, what I've seen the existing business side, there's not much under 200K because essentially under how existing businesses are valued, it's on a multiple how much the owner's making. So
right,
two, three, four times the owner's compensation. So if you're buying a business that's $200,000, maybe the owner is making like 60K. And there could be some seller financing, so you don't have to invest the full $200,000.
right,
But if you're looking at business 75, 100,000, these are businesses that are losing money generally. And you'll see on business websites like vettedbiz.com or BizBuySell, BizQuest, and they'll on purpose not disclose the owner compensation, the EBITDA income.
hmm
They just list the revenue, and that's an immediate red flag where if they're just listing the revenue and they're not showing how much the owner makes,
Right.
owner's probably losing money and has to inject more capital every month in the business. So
Right.
you can find some diamonds in the rough, and you could negotiate some seller financing where you put, if the business is for sale for 300K, maybe you put 100K, 150K, and then you
Right.
pay the seller over a year, 2 years, 3 years. It
Mhm.
is negotiable to a in a certain way. But the issue on the existing business side is the processing times are taking a while now. I think it's like 6 months, 8 months.
Right.
You could go into more details on that, where a seller doesn't really want to wait around, especially if you need the sale to be contingent on the E-2 visa approval.
Right.
Makes it a little harder. So starting a new business, whether it's a startup, franchise, it seems like it's been more practical. And then once you're here on the ground, your spouse could buy that business, or you can
Mhm.
expand your little small business empire once you're actually here.
Right. On that note, though, with respect to how long these applications are taking, it is it is clear that there's been a backlog that's been generated through the consulates, and um, it's still, I would say, at the very least 6 months plus in order to get an interview, and that's from the time the application is all bundled up, submitted. Everything is just sitting with the consulate. However, we do have clients that, what they've done is, maybe they have been in a situation where they really cannot stand to wait, you know, half a year or longer to actually get into the U.S. to operate the business. So some of our clients, what they've done is we take a two-pronged approach to it. So the first step is, if the client's already in the U.S., there is the option of applying for a change of status while in the U.S. And although that's I call that a little bit of a band-aid solution,
Yeah,
or a supplemental solution, because
sure.
I don't normally recommend just to apply for this change of status and that's it, because with the change of status there are certain limitations in that. Once the application is submitted and it's approved, that's great. However, the status itself is valid for up to 2 years. Okay, so it can be granted for 2 years. However, and this is something that a lot of people sometimes miss, that status is only valid while the individual's in the U.S. So in other words, if the person bought the business, applied for a change of status to an E2, was granted the E2 status, and then for whatever reason, vacation, emergency, otherwise had to leave the U.S.,
Yeah.
they cannot get back in on that E2 status, because the jurisdiction to enter on an E2 remains with the consulate, because it's an actual E2 visa that's required. So that's why I look at it as a more of a supplemental application. I wouldn't rely on that standalone. I would say to look at, if needed, to do the E2 supplemental application, but don't ignore the actual visa application, which is going to be um, you know helpful for the individual to ultimately be a little bit mobile and be able to re-enter the U.S. I know we deal with a lot of Canadians on our end, and for Canadians, they typically get an E2 visa for 5 years, right? That's what's granted through the consulate. Now, although the visa itself is granted for 5 years, when that person enters the U.S., they enter for a 2 year period, because it's a 2 year status that's issued. So basically, within a 2 year period, that person, if they left the U.S. and re-entered, they can ask for a new 2 year I-94, as long as the visa is valid. And so sometimes people are surprised when they get, they get advice to apply for a change of status in the U.S. and not knowing the actual repercussions that may come.
Yeah, you're not going home for Christmas most likely, unless you can
Exactly.
get that consulate interview and get the E2 visa,
Right.
after doing the change of status. Can Canadians change status? So if someone's doing visa-free travel from Canada to the US,
Right.
can they change status to an E2 visa?
They can. So Canadians are visa exempt, and not in every instance would a Canadian actually get an I-94 record, right? So sometimes that may come up as an issue before filing for a change of status, because if there's no I-94 record technically, they may need to first reach out to CBP and try to resolve things on that end,
Okay.
or they may just submit the actual change of status itself and then wait to see whether the USCIS comes back with any issues related to I-94, and then perhaps not be preemptive and deal with that at that point.
So
Uh,
that's where the strategy comes in, and it's case by case scenario.
it is, right. Normally, if a Canadian is flying into the US, they should be able to go online and check their I-94 record through the DHS website, and they should be able to see an I-94 record. That's
And
been
is it the same for someone from France or Italy that's using ESTA to come into the States? Could they also change status, or is it
So
different for
that's
them?
not the same. So that's the difference. If somebody is entering on ESTA, uh, ESTA requirements are very stringent, and so that person on ESTA may not extend their status. They may not change their status. If the person from France, to your example, entered with an actual visa rather than ESTA, then yes, they may also do a change of status from within the U.S.
Interesting. Yeah, I've never had anyone explain it to me that Canadians could and the nuances there. I always just heard unless you enter in with a visa, you can't do a change of status. But that's a pretty nice tool for Canadians that want to get going, get the business started, enroll their kids in school,
Yeah,
and don't want
definitely.
to go through another winter.
Definitely. And I'm sure you've been seeing, Patrick. I know we've worked on some mutual clients. Many Canadians, as I mentioned, they are applying for E2s. They are, you know, they're finding ways to, to live their lives in the U.S. And many clients end up choosing. I don't know if you've seen the same, but Florida, Arizona, Texas, California, right? It's almost like you can predict it when you're
Yeah.
speaking
I
to
mean,
these.
I think with our mutual clients, it's got to be like 80% Florida, and then the rest are spread out between Texas, Arizona, and then a little Southern California from our friends from British Columbia.
Yeah, yeah, it happens quite frequently. That's correct. Um, one thing I wanted to mention that's been a change since the last time you and I got on, and it's actually a very positive change. The Even though in the past, we have an E2 principal applicant, and then if there's a spouse, the spouse would need to apply for a dependent visa, and that's still the case. Spouses, children would still need to apply for dependent visas. However, in the past, the spouse was able to get work authorization by submitting an I-765 application for employment authorization document, acronym being EAD, and it was taking several months for that to be
And
approved.
that's time the spouse isn't making money and helping
Exactly.
support the family. I mean,
Right.
it was like taking 5, 6, 7 months
Oh,
for
sometimes we've
clients.
seen it even longer. I mean, these days it may take 8 to 10 months to actually get an EAD approved. But nowadays, thanks to the changes that have been implemented, the spouse is able to get work authorization essentially upon entry to the U.S. So, uh, with an E2 in particular for a spouse, the I-94 is noted as E2 with an S, and that would allow the spouse to actually get a work authorization on the spot. They can apply for a social security number, and they can start looking for work. They can do part-time jobs, full-time jobs, a mix of the two. We've even had clients that have set up their own businesses in the U.S. as a dependent spouse. They can work for the underlying E2 business, of course. So there's it just makes it a lot more of a friendlier visa, to look at, from a family perspective.
Yeah, I mean, I can relate to that because my wife's from Europe. I sponsored her green card. It took her like 6 months to be able to get that work authorization. And she was trying to interview for places saying, I'm eventually going to get it.
Right.
And sure enough, she got it, had like 4 interviews, got a job in 5 weeks. And like nothing there, you could make no steps forward with job interviews until you have that card. Like
Right.
employers don't care. So it was nice to have that. This is years back now, 3-4 years back. But it put less pressure on me as entrepreneur, as running your own business in the US. Some months you're doing really well, and other months not so well. So having a spouse that has a stable income while the entrepreneur has a business with fluctuations can be a nice model for those that are in the US, especially moving to the US.
Right.
As the business scales up and has those fluctuations.
Right. Yeah, definitely. Children, would also be able to get the dependent visas. But for children to qualify, they would have to be, literally a dependent of the principal applicant and be under 21 years old.
And can kids work, or can they just study?
They can only study.
And then what do you see practically, like someone's on the E-2, they like the US, are they then changing status to a green card option like the EB3 or EB2 or EB1?
Yes.
What do you see clients doing? Because I don't think we've had a single client renew the E2. They always get the green card somehow in that 5-year period if they want it.
Correct. So the E2 itself does not lead, naturally to a green card, right? So the E2 is considered as a temporary visa. However, there are, you mentioned, EB3, EB2. There's also, EB5s for, those that are substantially investing. When I say substantially investing, when we talk about substantial investment with an E2, again, we talked about, $50, $75, $100,000 plus. With the EB5, it's a higher investment, right? So if I had a client that was, and it happens, clients come to us and say, hey, I want to apply for EB5, right? Okay, well, then we kind of break down what that EB5 business is. All right. Let's say they're going to be buying a franchise that's worth, $1.5 million. Okay. It's a really, something that's already,
they own the land, the building,
everything. Right. Yeah. But if that person started off straight with an EB5, then it's going to take years.
I think it's like 3 or 4 years now until you can get the consulate, until you get all the approvals, go to the consulate, and come in with the green card.
Right. So can you imagine somebody spending $1 million plus and not having any work authorization to be part of that business, for that entire period of time? It's not very practical. So for those clients, if they can qualify for an E2, and I say if because it sounds like if they're spending that much money with an EB5, they're gonna have the
I guess it comes down to the ownership, at least 50% ownership of the business.
Correct, but also what the nationality of that individual is, right? Because E2, it's not necessarily available for everybody. It is available for, there's dozens and dozens of countries, but again, we deal with a lot of Canadians. We also deal with Mexican nationals, European. There's all
there's like 75 countries or something, and they're usually adding to the list, and sometimes they're taking off. Like I know Iran was recently taken off, and then New Zealand was added, Israel was added.
That's right. That is correct. So long as the person can qualify for the E2, I would say probably the better strategy would be to focus on the E2 first, get the E2, and then later on you can look at the EB5 options. Or if it's not that much of an investment to qualify for an EB5, then yes, we would look at whether an EB3 option is available. Keep in mind, the spouse is able to work, right? So there's nothing preventing, if the spouse is working and working for another employer in the US, there's nothing preventing that employer from pursuing a green card option for the spouse, right? All the while they're on an E2. So
I've seen we've definitely have had a few clients. The spouse gets a job, it's like 6 month trial periods, doing well,
mhm,
and then asks to get sponsored. If you don't ask, you don't receive. So let you got to
exactly
let your employer know what you need and what you're looking for. And
right.
with this super tight labor market that we have in the U.S. with like 3.6% unemployment, if you're doing well, like they'll usually bend over backwards to keep you. And a lot of employers are happy to sponsor green cards,
Right.
especially once they've tested you out. It's a little
Right.
harder if they don't know how you're working to commit to the process. But if you've already started working there, you're doing well,
Mhm.
it's
Oh,
possible.
exactly. And I mean, to your point, sometimes employers are, they just don't know, what is like, what is a person's that besides they have
Yeah.
work authorization in the U.S. So if you don't shoot, you don't score. You gotta ask. You gotta feel comfortable, I think, with the employer. Be comfortable in your position and so forth. But yeah, there's that's happened multiple times with our clients as well.
And what are the changes like for the change of status? I had heard, I haven't had it confirmed, but if someone does an E2, for example, and then changes to an EB5, they don't have to wait like the full 3 years or 4 years to get the work authorization. So,
Correct.
maybe you're an E2 visa investor, you've invested in a franchise, the franchise has grown,
Mhm.
you want to maybe sell it or put a day-to-day manager in, you have a job offer.
Right.
Could you elaborate a little bit on that and which change of status green card options might allow someone to get like basically the benefits of a green card early?
Right. So with the recent changes with the EB5 program, there is now the option of actually submitting the application along with an adjustment of status, so long as that visa is available, it's immediately available for for that national's country. All right. So there is with the adjustment of status. So the petition is submitted along with the employment authorization, along with the advanced parole, and that would ultimately allow for a combo card to be issued, whereby it's going to allow for the individual and possibly children and so forth to be able to work, right? If they qualify for the EB5 or in principle at the very least. However, as we talked earlier, it's not an authorization that's going to come immediately. There is currently a backlog when it comes to getting this combo card. So these days it may be 9 months, 10 months or so to actually get that. But that
Well,
is
it beats
also
like 3-4 years.
versus that, of course.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. So that is a strategy that's been put forth with some of our EB5 clients as well.
What are like some topics that you push back clients on where, you ask for the documents, you have their best interests at stake. You want them to get the E2 visa approval and it's like,
Mhm.
hey, come on, these things are non-negotiable or I'm not comfortable putting this petition forward.
Yeah, so I mean, it's a good question, Patrick, and thanks for asking it because I did want to raise this. Um, Particularly when it comes to startup visas. There's when the person is initiating the process, and maybe they hear some things but don't hear everything. That's being said. It's not enough just to transfer funds to for example, a newly formed U.S. account. That's still considered as passive funds, right? So particularly when it comes to the uh, startup businesses. Sometimes our clients um, they're thinking about, for example, buying maybe buying a building, buying equipment, buying machinery, buying stock and merchandise and so forth. However, they haven't pulled the trigger on that, and so saying in a business plan that, well, I plan on purchasing X number of widgets, it's going to cost me X number of dollars. It's not the same, and is not proving the case to the consulate that there has been a substantial investment that is at risk, right? So those are two of the qualifying factors that are looked at when it comes to an E2. And so, they the client has to take that additional step. Now, there are some, I would say, some protection that a client may have when it comes to scenarios like that, whereby maybe they would, make a purchase conditional on getting approved, right? As long as that's only condition, that's okay. However, they can't just, there has to be a purchase sale agreement showing that condition. In addition to that, there has to be funds that are in a third party escrow account so that it's
Exactly.
not in their own control. That's why I like the idea of buying either an existing business or buying into a franchise,
Yeah.
because many times the franchisors are able to show that there is they understand. I mean, you tell me, Patrick.
Yeah, no, we convince them, and we're always advocating on behalf of our clients. Like, hey, we have this investor. It's going to take 8 months. If you're not willing to condition 100% of the investment, maybe 80%, 90%,
Okay.
and maybe there's a good faith deposit of $20,000, but then the rest of the purchase is refunded if there's a denial. We've seen also, I interviewed a franchisor yesterday. It's a clothing boutique, luxury high-end good resale.
Okay.
So, that's something that you could potentially negotiate, buying $100,000 worth of products to resell in the United States. And if you're not approved for the E-2 visa, there's an easy out, as it's a very robust, and people, will always buy used Louis Vuitton bags, and
And that's a brick and mortar. It's a
brick and mortar retail.
Okay.
So that's an option where you could be on consignment, or if you're looking to invest more capital and really really go above and beyond the substantial investment requirement, you can just purchase the goods outright.
Okay, very good. And what other, if I may ask you as well, in terms of the nature of the businesses that you are finding? I mean, we have some mutual clients, but I mean, you have a vast array of clients that you deal with that,
Yeah,
individually. So, what have you been seeing from your perspective? What?
definitely. Maybe I can just share my screen just for like a
Yeah.
minute or two. So we have two companies. One's Visa Franchise. We have about 10 clients every month that we work with on a consultative basis to find and analyze businesses. And it's all over the place. And we've looked at like 7,000 businesses, 50 different industries. Recent clients have invested in service-based businesses. So think home services, painting, real estate property management has been popular, moving, junk removal. Service businesses tend to have a pretty high profit margin. And then the big mainstay brands, they're not franchising at the moment. So they're not accepting E2 visa investors at the moment. So think Subway, McDonald's, Dunkin' Donuts, Burger King. We can reach out and we can ask. We can try to have you accepted, but you can see. I'll zoom in here a little bit. Right now, it's a free tool. Probably next year we'll make people pay for it, but you can see E2 visa eligibility for 5,700 franchises. So
Mhm.
we've asked the franchisor, hey, are you willing to work with E2 visa holders? Have you worked with them in the past?
Right.
And you can look on any franchise on our website and you'll be able to see that. And then for paid users, we charge $79 a month, and there's a free trial. You can then reach out, call the franchisor, email the franchisor, or you could work with us. But most of our clients are investing in service-based concepts. Some are investing in food. And yeah, you have all these indicators here: payback period, average unit volume. This is our sister company, Vetted Biz, but that gives you a good idea. And if you're working in the business day to day, I like to see a payback period less than 4 years.
Mhm.
If it's something that you're working, less hours, and maybe you're going to be going back and forth between Canada and the States, then it could be it could be a lower payback period, maybe 8 years, 9 years. If you're working minimal hours to oversee that business, still
Right.
maintain E2 visa. and manage your business, whether it's in Canada, Mexico, Europe, etc. We do have quite a few of those clients where they're very wealthy, they're making a lot of money. By a lot of money, I say over $300,000 a year, and they want to maintain that revenue source. So we have to choose the industry very carefully that it's enough high margin to then have a day-to-day manager so they can manage them remote on business trips back wherever they have
Sure.
business interest.
All right. Are you seeing a lot of retirees reach out to you for? I mean, it's not meant to be passive business, but
Yeah.
for them, they're going to have some control of the
We'll
business.
use like the word semi-absentee where, yeah, we definitely have retirees, 60s, 70s, even 80s. We've had clients. And the key is really understand the franchise and the business model that you're investing in. There's got to be that margin. Ideally, it's a sticky business that clients need to be coming back, and that you have a good manager to manage the day-to-day operations. Now, we work with some franchisors that can help find that manager, train that manager, place that manager into your business. But at the end of the day, if you're the investor, you're getting your E-2 visa from the business, you better be on top of the bank accounts, approving major expenses,
Right.
understanding payroll. So the franchisor is helping a ton, and you have your day-to-day manager. But at the end of the day, it's a small business investment, and if you're not on top of it, you could risk losing all your money from that business investment. And we've seen that happen across Florida, where people aren't on top and they didn't choose well the type of business they were getting involved in, and someone sold them, oh, this is a passive option, there's not much work to be had here.
Right.
And then whether it's a bad actor or just shifts in the market and the business wasn't able to adapt, the business closed down and the family lost all their money and had to move back home. So it's definitely things you need to be on top of. There are great options. There's not a ton of them, but there are great options for those that are not able to allocate 40, 50 hours a week and want to allocate substantially less hours. But you have to have the financial controls in place and really run a tight system with management meetings bi-weekly, at least monthly, to understand what's going on financially as well as the general strategy of the business.
Right. Okay. Well, it's good information, Patrick.
Thanks.
I think we may have some questions if you want to.
Yeah. Why don't we go through? It seems like most are visa related.
All right. Let me just take a look. In this scenario, E-2 visa, I am already importing some items from USA, but I can enhance my business if I can set up my LLC in USA. Can you please guide us? Mention situation for E-2 visa from Pakistan. Yeah, so it's a good question. If there is already an active business, now it's been a foreign business, and the country itself, in this case, they're talking about Pakistan. There is a treaty between Pakistan and the U.S. And it qualifies for both the E-2 and E-1. The E-1 is actually, and instead of being a treaty investor visa, it is a treaty trader visa. And sometimes a company may qualify for either. It's a matter of looking into the details of the business activities, looking at the prospects for what's going to be done in the U.S. and then determining whether it is better to do an E-2 or E-1, or maybe even an L-1, which is an intercompany transfer. So there might be multiple options. In a case like this, I would highly recommend to reach out, have a consultation so we can better assess on a one-to-one basis what would be the best option for you. All right, how much is the minimum investment for an E-2? And we have covered that on this event. Generally, I would say, it's $75,000 to $100,000 plus. However, in the last couple of months, we've had an approval as little as $40,000. But I would, when it comes to an E-2, the more, the better, right? So if you can prove to a consular officer that this is legitimately, it's a substantial investment for the nature of the business, then the prospect of being approved will be quite good. All right. I am from Pakistan. I need to talk to someone who may help start process for a few of my family members and friends in Pakistan. I would say to reach out, give our office a call. Our link should be in the bio. So if you wanted to set up a consultation, you're free to do so. There is there would be a consultation fee. I don't have what that fee is offhand. Just reach out to our office and somebody would be able to help you. How can we contact Fatty and Patrick? Patrick, how do we contact you?
The best way would just be shoot me an email at patrick@visafranchise.com.
Okay. All right. Very good. And for myself, you can also reach out to fadi@visaplace.com. But again, there should be a link in the bio for phone numbers to reach out to our office, and we can certainly get you set up for a meeting. There might be some. There looks like there's some more questions here, Patrick. Let's just go through.
Yeah, it seems like a few more came in.
How do you prove that you invested enough money when buying a franchise, but you can't operate until a visa is approved? Well, again, investing and investing the actual funds, whether it's a real investment, it's a real purchase, you closed on the business, or if you have a condition that's associated with that with the contract, either way is possible. However, like what you can't do is just simply, you can't provide the details or a cutout of here's the business I want to purchase or here's what I want to do in the U.S. And then just prove they have money in the U.S. and that's it. That's not going to be like the whole point here is that you got to take action. You have to show that the investment is at risk. So keep that in mind. It has to be at risk. So if somebody has not already made that purchase or invested the actual funds for the underlying business, then you're missing out the at-risk part of it, right? And that's where sometimes leveraging an escrow agent to act as sort of the middle party to hold those funds contingent on the E-2 approval is one way to go. I don't know if you have anything else to add.
I would say the beauty with the franchise is franchises are regulated by the Federal Trade Commission in the United States. There's a FTC franchise rule. Every franchise that is for sale, is seeking new franchisees, needs to have a franchise disclosure document and a franchise agreement that is part of that. So part of the franchise disclosure document, item 7, needs to disclose the necessary costs to the best knowledge possible of the franchise brand of what it's going to cost you to open up the business and run that business. So there's a checklist, essentially. It's the franchise fee, rent deposit, startup inventory, if there's going to be leasehold improvements, and then additional working capital. Could be 3 months. It could be 6 months. If you're doing like a staffing business, it could be over 12 months of additional working capital that you need. So that's going to be all line by line in the item 7 of the franchise disclosure document. And we've had clients in the past, especially when they're investing less money for the E-2 visa, as the interview can be tough, come with the actual physical FDD and be like, hey, the investment's $70K, another 100 or another 1,000 franchisees have done this before. I know it seems like a low investment for this type of business model, but this isn't just me saying it. This is what other franchisees have done in the past. And this is a federally regulated document that I'm presenting to you that shows the necessary costs to open up a business like this. And I mean, Fadi, if they've gone through like 80% of those costs, then maybe some of it's contingent on the E2 visa.
That's right.
Um, I've never seen an issue when they go through all those expenses and spend most of it, and some of that could be contingent on the E2.
Right. Exactly. I agree, Patrick. I mean, the scenarios that are troublesome are for those that, they have they have a great business idea, right? There's a great business model that's on paper, but it's on paper only, and they want to move forward with an application, and again, showing that the funds are there, but they're not attached to something. So that is, this is something for everyone to keep in mind. Yes, is there a risk of a denial? I mean, there's always a risk of denial, but I mean, thankfully, if you align yourself with proper, partners to move your process forward, then hopefully that risk would be mitigated.
Well said. Um, and then we have a couple more questions. Maybe we just limit it to two more. I know
Yes.
Dimitri asked us, thanking us for the great information. Could you elaborate more on the profit side of the E2 business? I understand the business can't just produce marginal profits. How profitable must the business be in order to be able to extend an E2 visa after 2 years?
So depending on where you're from, it might not be only 2 years. It could be 5 years if the visa is good for 5 years. Um, but marginality really has to do with the ability of the business to hire individuals. So if you, even if you've had initially a business where you've been the sole person working there, and that might be acceptable for a short period of time, maybe even for the first year. But you know, by the time the visa itself is up for renewal, which could be after 5 years, but even if it is 2 years, if you're from a country where the visa is only issued for a shorter period of time, um, you really want to demonstrate that there has been others hired, and hopefully there's a there's a sort of a business reason to hire individuals, and you're not just hiring people for the sake of the visa itself, right? So there's no minimum, I would say, and there's been limited examples, personal examples I can talk about from clients that where due to a certain, I mean, not it wasn't recent, but due to the time of the year, they did not have anybody on payroll at that moment, but they could show that during peak season they had so many employees. So there's not a sort of one size fits all answer, so long as it's not just you're not earning enough just for yourself and for your family. There has to be other added benefits to the U.S.
And then maybe the last one is it necessary to have invested the amount already, or it can be invested gradually?
So for the most part, I mean, you do need to show that there is a substantial investment. So let's just pick an example. Let's say you found a business that's worth $250,000, right? If you can only show that you've invested, I'll give you an example of 50,000. Is 50,000 out of $250,000 substantial? I would say it's probably not, right? You do need to show that there is there's not a bright line rule here either. So it's a matter of relying on experience. Um, it doesn't have to be necessarily the entire 250,000, but at that level of investment, I would expect for it to be a good a good bit of it, like greater than 70%, 80%. Um, can it be a little bit less, perhaps, depending on the circumstances, of course. Uh, and keeping in mind, financing, some financing is allowable under an E2, and that is for financing where there's a personal risk involved. So if somebody had a personal line of credit, for example, and they didn't have any investment, but they're able to get the personal line of credit, and 100% of their investments coming through the personal line of credit, that's still technically okay. It's different from getting a business loan whereby business assets, the business itself, is being used as collateral, right? Those funds are not going to be seen as at-risk funds. There could also be a mixture of the two, right? But it just, bearing that in mind, I think, um, there are, for the most part, on our end, we do see, we see people that have used, even put up their personal homes as, getting a home equity line of credit. That's also at-risk funds. All right. So maybe there's one more question, Patrick, if you don't mind. Then let's let me just see here. For businesses that do installation services for homes and small services out of a vehicle primarily, what purchase and investments are useful? Truck, trailer, property, lease agreement. Yeah, all of that would be, I would say, useful equipment. With the E-2, unlike other types of visas where sometimes, there has to be an actual, physical property, lease agreement, and so forth, the E-2 does not require that. So we've had, for example, clients that have set up a food truck in the U.S., right? It doesn't necessarily make sense for somebody that has a food truck to go and, rent a bricks and mortar location just for the sake of the application, essentially. It's probably money better spent to put that into the actual truck, the food truck itself, or to buy, to kind of to have plans to expand that food truck, and you can only be in one place at one time, so you probably want to hire other people to operate the the other trucks and services. All right.
Well, we've
Thank
gone
you.
through a ton of questions. I mentioned my contact information. Easiest email, patrick@visafranchise.com. Encourage people also look at www.visafranchise.com. Our sister platform, vettedbiz.com. Free access right now till the end of the year. So you can see any franchise if it's eligible for the E-2 visa. So that's closing from our end. Fadi, really appreciate having me on, and look forward to working with more mutual clients.
Oh, definitely. And on our end, best place to book the consultation is to visit www.visaplace.com. And it's going to be very clear how to book a consultation there. Thank you again, Patrick. It was a pleasure.
No, thank you.
All right.
Appreciate it.
Thank you.